Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant and welcome back to Elite Dangerous. Now it's been a while since I've done one of these speculation videos, and that's largely because the content for the next Elite Dangerous expansion is an unknown. Whilst Frontier have confirmed that an expansion is planned for release towards the end of 2020, and that by the time it's released, it will have taken roughly 2.5 years of development time, which by the way is longer than most of their full-sized games, they still haven't said what the expansion is, aside from pointing out that it will be their biggest update yet for Elite. So I've kind of kept away from speculation videos for the most part and focused on the current state of the game. But that said, every time I release a video, someone in the comments section will mention the words space legs, so I kind of want to talk about it a bit, so in this video I'm going to do exactly that. Firstly then, and just to get this out of the way, what is space legs, and is it even a possibility? Well, space legs is the term the community have given to the ability to get up out of the ship's seat and walk around. Essentially, it's the first person walking around component of the game, also once called Elite Feat by some. Frontier have spoken many times over the years saying that they do want this to be a part of the game, all but confirming that it's a case of when rather than if. Reddit user 100 Year War collected together very recently a bunch of times Frontier have discussed all of this, and you can see that post linked in the video description, do go take a look. Other than that, last year a leak emerged from the 4chan website, allegedly containing Frontier's roadmap for the next year or two. Now naturally, there was a lot of doubt about the legitimacy of this leak, however over time everything on the leak has proven to be true, with the exception of 2 points. There was the left field case of the claim that Frontier were working on a Lego game. Clearly they're not, or at least they haven't announced it yet. If they do, seems unlikely though. The second point that hasn't come true yet is about Elite. The leak suggested that the 2020 update would indeed be space legs along with base building, but only time will tell whether that's actually true. But data miners meanwhile have also found references to base building within the game's files. That's just a brief summary then, just to establish that space legs are certainly very much a possibility. On a side note, the images you can see in the background are taken from the official Elite Dangerous digital artwork book. Now, what I'd like to talk about in this video is what space legs could mean for the game. And again, just to reiterate, this is speculation. It's just a case of me thinking out loud, but I really would love to hear your thoughts and feelings as well on the subject in the comments section, so yeah, do let me know. Most obvious point then is space legs have the huge potential to change Elite into a very different game. But just how far would Frontier want to go with that? After all, there's a number of things to consider. Space legs would need to be an addition to the game. It would be an optional paid expansion after all, which means that all the current game mechanics would, for the most part, need to remain in place, simply to allow those without the update to continue playing. It also seems likely that Frontier would want the spaceship aspects of the game, or the gameplay rather, to largely remain the same. Despite being a niche game, Elite is still very successful, so changing existing gameplay would be a big risk. So I think it's reasonable to assume then that space legs would bring additional gameplay rather than wholesale changing what we already have. In short, current missions, trading, mining, ship combat and exploration would all likely remain the same. It seems unlikely that you would need to leave your ship to pick up regular missions, for example, seeing as not all players would be able to even leave the ship. So, space legs would have to bring additional gameplay, something that exists outside of what Elite already offers. Walking around ships, it seems likely to be an obvious first step. Frontier have stated in the past that all the ships have been designed with the idea of their internal structures in mind. So the ability to walk around the inside of ships seems like a given. If space legs were to be a thing, that is. Now, if I were Frontier, I would offer walking around the inside of ships as a free upgrade to all Elite game accounts, regardless of whether you buy the expansion or not. Leaving the ship would then require the update. I think that would be a nice incentive for all players, but that's just me. On another note regarding the ships, I have my doubts that they would be fully explorable. Whilst the Sidewinder only has a few rooms to consider, the Anaconda is truly massive, and modelling the entire interior of that might be something that Frontier were willing to be unwilling to do, or feel perhaps it's unnecessary. So if this was to be the case, we might find that we could only walk around the essential rooms, such as the bridge, personal cabin and cargo areas, but who knows really. Walking around ships would clearly be a massive attraction to the game, and personally I still want to get first-person access to that observation lounge at the front of the Anaconda. It seems pretty obvious to me that space stations would not be entirely accessible. For Orbis space stations, for example, the living area that we can see on the ring there with grass and houses inside of it, this area alone has been calculated to be at least as large, or perhaps larger, than the entire game world of GTA 4. The interior of stations, meanwhile, houses millions of people, so each station is easily as large as any Earth-based city. It makes more sense that access to the stations would be restricted to specific areas, such as the landing pad, hangar, and any service areas that the stations offers. And we can also see communal areas and shop-like areas in the Elite concept art. It seems perfectly reasonable to me that if space legs were going to be a thing, that walking around on the planetary surface would also be a thing. There's not really a lot to add here, other than to suggest that caves, overhangs and other visually rich areas would be a nice addition. Whether or not base building is ever going to be a thing, it certainly is an interesting thing to think about. The biggest question then would be base building in space or on planetary surfaces. Well, Frontier have discussed this in the past, and they've mentioned the idea of inflatable space stations. And to quote Frontier here from March 2014, an interview with Scott Manley and David Braben. One of the things that we have planned, where ultimately probably not the first release of the game, is that players can buy essentially an inflatable space station. This is where you would buy something that's essentially a box that just fits into one of the biggest ships, completely fills up your cargo bay. You take it out, you attach it to a very specific asteroid or a type with the right minerals in it, and it melts it and then inflates it, and then it cools and you've got a space station. And you can see a link for that in the video description. So it's certainly an idea that Frontier have thrown about more than once. Of course, the biggest question regarding space legs is gameplay. All we can do here is speculate, of course, but one thing that seems very obvious to me, space legs gameplay will not wholesale replace existing gameplay, and that's for the reasons I've already mentioned. Now, I've seen in the past many people being concerned that it would be boring to be able to leave the ship only to head on out to a mission giver or a kiosk in order to pick up a mission. Personally, I can't see the existing mission board being replaced. The mission board is a fundamental part of Elite and always has been. Also, as mentioned previously, not everyone will be able to leave the ship. So refueling, rearming, ship repairs, mission boards, all of these things we currently do when sat in the pilot's seat, well, I'd be very surprised to see them disappear. The obvious choice would be for space legs to add additional gameplay, so mission givers located on planets and inside space stations that give space leg specific missions, storefronts that sell space leg specific equipment, weapons and clothing, and all of that type of things. What type of missions these would ultimately lead to, though, is certainly an open question. First-person combat seems like an obvious choice, and the leak from last year did discuss first-person combat with Thargoids, so we'll have to see, but it seems like a natural addition. Ship-to-ship boarding has also been spoken about in the past by Frontier, and I'd be very surprised if this didn't become a thing with an eventual Space Legs update. The only issue here would be how players would get on board ships of players who don't actually have the update. But that goes back to my point of giving walking around ships as a free update to all players. Again, it's what I would do, but who knows? Whatever form of gameplay emerges with any potential Space Legs expansion, though, it seems very likely that it would fit into the existing Elite Dangerous game loop templates. So, procedurally generated missions, a lot of running around, shooting, collecting and trading for sure. So there we have it, some random thoughts on what Space Legs may be if and when it eventually turns up in Elite Dangerous. As mentioned earlier, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think Space Legs could include or should include if it were to ever be a thing. Just let me know in the comments section, and also let me know what you'd like to see in the paid expansion that's coming later in 2020. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.